Most LSAT takers don't realize this, but the test writers are playing games with your vocabulary. They're counting on you to interpret words like most, only if, or qualify the way you would in everyday life. But here's the thing. The LSAT doesn't play by real-world rules. If you don't learn the language of the LSAT, you're leaving points on the table. Today, I'll show you how to use their own language against them. First, for those who don't know me, my name is Steve Schwartz. I've been teaching the LSAT since 2005, and I personally increased my own LSAT score from a 152 to a 175. Now, here's why vocabulary matters on the LSAT. The LSAT, of course, isn't a vocabulary test in their traditional sense. It's not about using obscure words like obfuscate. Instead, it's about using common words in uncommon ways. Words you think you know, like consistent or some, might mean something totally different on the LSAT. Misinterpreting just one word can cost you several points on a reading comp passage, for example, and over the course of the test, that adds up fast. By the end of this video, you'll know how to decode LSAT vocabulary, recognize traps, and handle ambiguous or unfamiliar terms with confidence. Whether it's breaking down conditional statements or understanding nuanced quantifiers, you'll leave here with tools to outthink the test. Let's start why LSAT vocabulary is so tricky. The test writers love to take words we use every day and strip them down to their literal, technical meanings. Why do they do this? Because the LSAT is testing your ability to think like a lawyer, and that's someone who interprets language with precision. Take the word qualify, for example. In everyday life, it often means to meet a standard like I qualified for a scholarship. But on the LSAT, it could mean to limit or restrict a claim. If a passage says, for example, all animals are capable of learning except certain invertebrates, the phrase qualifies the broader claim by adding an exception. Now, conditionality on the LSAT is also incredibly important. So words like if, only if, and unless are essential for you to understand. For example, the phrase only if sets up or introduces a necessary condition. So if I say, you'll ace the LSAT only if you study hard, the sentence is telling you that studying hard is required to ace the LSAT. But of course, it doesn't mean that studying hard guarantees you'll ace the LSAT. That would be a classic LSAT mistake, assuming a conditional statement works both ways when it actually doesn't, and you could bet there would be trick answer choices exploiting that common mistake. And let's also talk about the word unless. This is one of the most confusing words for LSAT takers, but all you've got to do is replace the word unless with the phrase if not, and then everything becomes a whole lot clearer. For example, the sentence, you won't ace the LSAT unless you study, becomes, if you don't study, you won't ace the LSAT. It's a small translation, but it makes a huge difference in questions where this comes up. Now let's talk about quantifier words. By those I mean words like most, some, and few, which are going to trip up even the most prepared test takers. Take the word some, for example. In everyday speech, we think of it as a few, but not all. But on the LSAT, the word some just means at least one, and it could mean all. It includes the possibility of all. So if I say some students aced the LSAT, that sentence would allow for the possibility that every single student aced it. It opens the door for that possibility. Now, the word most is another tricky term. It means more than half, of course, but unlike in everyday life, on the LSAT, most could include all. It could include 100%. So for example, the phrase most people enjoy coffee wouldn't rule out the possibility that every single person enjoys coffee. Now, there are also some LSAT words that aren't inherently tricky, but the way the test uses them is tricky. For example, the word consistent. In casual conversation in everyday life, the word consistent often means reliable or regular, like on a regular interval. But on the LSAT, it just means not contradictory. So if two statements don't directly conflict, they're consistent even if they don't logically connect in any way. So the sentence, it is raining outside, is consistent with pizza being delicious. Those two things, of course, have nothing to do with each other, but because they could both be true at the same time, they are consistent with one another. Another tricky LSAT word is the word or. In everyday life, the word or typically implies exclusivity, one, the other, or both, like this or that. But on the LSAT, the word or is inclusive unless explicitly stated otherwise. This would mean both options could be true at the same time. So if a sentence says, you can bring a salad or a sandwich, the LSAT is assuming you could bring both of them unless you were told otherwise. Now, let's talk about what you do when the LSAT throws a totally unfamiliar word at you. The first thing is, don't panic. You don't need a dictionary on test day, and you're also not allowed to have one, but context is enough. The LSAT is deliberately designed so that you can infer meanings from the way words are used in the passage. So take the word extant, for example, E-X-T-A-N-T, by the way. If a passage contrasts extant with extinct, you can infer that it means still in existence. So just to clarify that, those two words actually are then opposites. Extinct means, of course, no longer around, but the word extant, again, E-X-T-A-N-T, would mean it is still in existence or not extinct. Now, if you're really stuck, use process of elimination. This is your friend. Of course, the LSAT is giving you enough clues to rule out the wrong answers, even if you're not totally sure about the correct answer. But of course, if you can knock out the other four, whatever remains, even if you don't really understand exactly what it's saying, it must, of course, be the answer. Now, with logical reasoning in particular, the LSAT loves to set these traps with subtle word shifts. For example, in logical reasoning, if a stimulus says most athletes train daily, you can't automatically assume that some athletes don't, because again, most does not exclude the possibility of all. Or if a sentence says, if you're invited to the event, you must RSVP, you can't automatically assume that RSVPing means you were invited. Traps like this rely on everyday assumptions creeping into your reasoning. If you recognize them, you'll be better equipped to avoid them. Now, if you're struggling with LSAT vocabulary, if you'd like my help applying these strategies to your LSAT prep on your journey to scoring a 170 plus, my team and I would be glad to help you out. At LSAT Unplugged, we offer live online classes via Zoom, on-demand video courses, small group coaching, and one-on-one coaching. You can check out the links below to book a call with me and my team. We'd be glad to help you out. Now remember that the LSAT, of course, is not testing whether you know obscure words. It is instead testing whether you can think critically about language. So if you understand the precise meanings of words like some, unless, and qualify, that can be the difference between a terrible score, a mediocre score, or an outstanding score. If you master LSAT vocabulary, you're not just improving your performance on the test itself, you're also building the skills you'll actually use as a lawyer. So again, if you'd like my help, you can check out the links below to book a call with me and my team. And in the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.